we always talk about roster building. You know, it's about more than 1 year. It's about more than immediacy. It's about you know, and GMs will tell you 3 years. I've argued it's really 2 years, but you know, it used to be 5 years. Either way, you got to think more than immediacy.
On the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. You got your Mac and Mac guys, both with their dark shirts on today. I got a little bit.
I always got to go dark, Jody. You know,
you like the dark. I think mine is actually a very dark blue, as a matter of fact. And for those who wonder, it's a girl dad shirt. My daughter gave me this for last Father's Day, I believe it was. And man, I put a T-shirt on because I went out and did gardening this weekend. I had to put a coat on this morning. What the hell is up with this weather, McMullen?
It's a yo-yo, Jody. Yeah. What the one day was up to actually the day of the Maxwell Club. So it was like 75 degrees. It was beautiful. Beautiful that day. Yeah.
And now we're back putting coats on. All right. That is to portend things to come for the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll determine over the next 2 hours here on Birds 365. Yeah, it's been busy since last you and I talked. You mentioned the Maxwell Club. You headed down there on Friday night. Unfortunately, I could not attend. I heard it was an outstanding program and a good time had by all.
Yeah, it always is. JAKIB Media put on the show, so it was great from that perspective as well. You get to see a bunch of people. Got to sit next to Brandon Barrett Brooks. I heard he made the Brandon Barrett mistake, and his lovely wife. So I got to meet the better half of that duo. Wonderful lady. So that was a lot of fun. A lot of people there. Obviously, got to see Brian Dawkins, and that was, you know, it's during. I joked about it. I wish you were there, Jody, because you know the Eagles had not been doing anything, and not been doing anything, and not been doing anything. Then all of a sudden, all right, I'm heading down to Atlantic City for the Maxwell Club. Then they're doing things. And obviously, you know, it was about 10 minutes after I sat down, the news broke that the Eagles re-signed Anthony Harris, and Rodney McLeod happened to be there. And I can just say that Rodney does not think he's going to be back with the Eagles, which is my assumption as well. So we'll see how that shakes out as well. But it was interesting from that perspective. But a great event overall. Can't give it enough recommendations. 5 stars, whatever your standard is. If you get a chance to go next year, it's great. Basically, the entire football world of the Delaware Valley, you know, is encompassed into one ballroom. So it's pretty cool.
That is very cool. Glad you enjoyed. And you mentioned the fact that things started to pick up after you and I got off the air on Friday. The first of which was Fletcher Cox, gone. See ya. Later. Bye. No longer a Philadelphia Eagle. An all-time great defensive tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. Flat out released by the Birds. And then in less than, 6 hours, 8 hours, somewhere thereabouts. And it's still not even official. But the word started to come out that Fletcher Cox was coming back to the Eagles on a 1-year contract, re-signed. The cap numbers, and we'll have our cap expert on a little bit later to try and clear some of this up, because I'll be completely honest, I don't understand exactly what was accomplished by releasing Fletcher Cox and then re-signing Fletcher Cox, which seems to be almost the exact same contract. Maybe they save a couple $100,000, maybe they save $1 million, and we'll get Brad Spielberg from Over the Cap to jump on with us and explain it to us. I guess it's Howie Roseman doing his number crunching magic with the salary cap. John, if you can explain it to me, I would love to learn. I don't quite.
Well, we tried. I gave it. That's the reason I got Brad on. So I want Brad to explain this, and I'm going to get out of the way. We kind of got into this on Friday. By the way, did I say Brian Dawkins? I had Brian Dawkins on my mind because he was at the Maxwell Club, but Rodney was there. And he got the humanitarian award. Rodney doesn't think he's back. So if I screwed that up.
You said you saw both of them.
Yeah. If I screwed that up, I just wanted to clarify. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, to me, it comes across, and again, you know, guys like Brad who really have this stuff down. They really understand what's going on. He called it, I think, one of the most complicated contracts he's ever seen with the NFL. The Eagles redid it so many times. I joked, there's so many addendums on this thing, so many post-it notes. You can just picture it just littered with, and they kind of wanted to reset it and go into the more of the Jason Kelsey year-to-year thing with Fletcher Cox, and they sort of bit the bullet, and this is the time they were able to get it done. And as I mentioned on Friday, it's a calculated gamble, because once you give somebody the opportunity to take phone calls, and Todd Francis, Fletcher's agent, he was able to take phone calls, presumably, and if somebody showed up with 2 years and maybe up to guaranteed money up to $20 million, you might lose the guy. So it was a little bit of a calculated gamble, but it was pretty clear early on, just by the way the Eagles handled the release, that they had a good indication they were going to be able to get him back. And, it was just sort of resetting from my perspective from this contract that was over leveraged from pushing the can down the road. Remember, we always talk about roster building. It's about more than 1 year. It's about more than immediacy. It's about, and GMs will tell you 3 years. I've argued it's really 2 years, but, it used to be 5 years. Either way, you got to think more than immediacy. And next year, we've been talking about this for a while. The new television contracts for the NFL kick in. So you're going to see this massive spike in the salary cap, because everything is figured out on the revenue shared between the players and owners. And there's going to be a big spike because of the increases in the TV deals. That doesn't kick in until next year. Looks like to me the Eagles want to get their ducks in a row and make sure they have everything ready and stop doing that stuff. So when the boom comes, they're ready for it.
So here is the simplest of questions. And again, we're going to have Brad on a little bit later, and he'll try and work out some of the cap implications of this deal. Should the Eagles have just moved on? Like you said, anytime you release a player, you're giving him a possibility to sell himself to the entire National Football League. You never know. Somebody comes in, does something financially that you don't expect. Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson. Oh, we'll get to that. But you never know. When you make a move like that, it didn't preclude the Eagles from re-signing Fletcher Cox, which is exactly what they did. Should they have just moved on and said, Fletcher, all-time great, acknowledge him as a guy who was a major contributor to the Super Bowl champion, but not the productive player he once was. Time to just go into let's rebuild this position mode. Should the Eagles have just said, all right, as long as we're releasing him, we might as well just move on from him as well? Or do you think they did the right thing by bringing him back?
No, I think they did the right thing by bringing him back. I think he's still a very good player. I think he's not the player he once was, and that's what people expect. And understandably, because this is, one of the greatest defensive players in Eagles history, and that's not hyperbole. This is one of their great players in their history. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, I knew they were trying to bring him back. Well, they said it at the end of the press release, but anytime they ever turn the page on a franchise icon, they get the full Monty treatment. Jeffrey Lurie chimes in, Howie Roseman chimes in, Nick Sirianni would have chimed in. This was sort of just a bookkeeping mode. You could see that early on. Look, what the Eagles are very good at, and we'll talk about this as the show goes on as well, because so many people are so upset they haven't been able to get much done in free agency. What the Eagles are very good at is valuation. Nobody can dismiss that. We talked about it with Boston Scott. Boston Scott's back. We had that discussion. You said, give him the $2.4 million. You don't need to give him the $2.4 million. And they were right. And they got him back. And they got him back at a more, at a better number for a third string running back. They're very good at valuation. Now you can talk about evaluation, which is probably more important, but that's a different discussion. And that's, more hit and miss. But they kind of understand where everybody fits in, where everybody should be. This is still a really good player. He's not a superstar like he once was. Very unlikely they're going to be replacing him. And I'd like, because the thought process is, well, Javon Hargrave is better than Fletcher Cox now because he had the sacks and he tied with Josh Sweat for the sacks lead. And Fletcher didn't have a big sack number. But I got to tell you, Jody, Javon was not good defending the run. And what do we always talk about in March? Nobody gives I say it 100 times. Nobody gives a shit about defending the run,
right?
Especially in March. But it gets more important as you get down to the season. So I went to Pro Football Focus and I looked it up. And our buddy Brad Spielberg is going to be on, so we'll give him another plug. Fletcher was 29th ranked by Pro Football Focus for defensive tackles. Javon was 31. The big difference was Fletcher's still really good defending the run, still okay, rushing the passer, not nearly as dominant as he once was. Javon was really good rushing the passer, really bad. I think it was 105 of 110 defending the run. That's how bad he was. They need this player. They still need this player. And he bought, and I'm talking about Fletcher Cox, he bought in the second half of the season. I always say with Fletcher, he had a lot of success with Jim Schwartz, a lot of success. And if you look at it from the player's perspective, he's playing 3 technique. He doesn't have any responsibilities. The head coach is there. The defensive line coach, Jeremiah Washburn, said, go get the quarterback. Just, have fun. Just rip, And all of a sudden, Jonathan Gannon shows up. Well, we're going to play a 3 technique, but sometimes we need you at 4 eyes. Sometimes we need you at 5. More buried fronts. They want to have different looks on different downs to try to confuse the quarterbacks, which didn't work that well. But nonetheless, that was the plan. He didn't like it. He was used to the other way of doing things. He had a ton of success the other way of doing things. And it took him a while to get used to it. But once he got used to it, and once he had his sort of little venting session, everything was fine. And they turned the page. And I do think people assume, like, if you argue with somebody or you argue with a coach or a coach yells at a player, that's it. They can't get along. It's not that case at all, And these two get along now. And they wanted him back. They got him to play. Now, everything comes down to money, and we'll talk about Deshaun Watson with that. Ultimately, everything comes down to money. And I'm not saying if another team didn't come in here at last minute and offer him 3 years with significant guaranteed money that went far above the Eagles, he'd be gone. He'd be out of here. But the Eagles are very good at judging where people are in the league. And they took that calculated gamble, and they were right. So, but I do think he should be back.
Right. And here's, and that was the question I asked about just on a talent and a football non-money side, was the right evaluation made to bring him back? And you're right. Unless Milton Williams becomes a full-time player next year, or the Eagles are going to use one of those first-round draft picks on a defensive tackle, which they still may. But you're planning on plugging and playing a player like that. They kind of needed to bring Fletcher Cox back. I'm glad you brought up Boston Scott. You're right. Howie Roseman judged the market. I thought 2.4 was not an outrageous number for a guy like Boston Scott on what I project them to be able to come in and do for the Eagles next year. They got him re-signed for a couple of $100,000 less. And I guess every couple of $100,000 add up. It is less than 1%. The cap is going to be what this year? Over 200 million, right?
208, I believe.
Yeah. So if we're talking about a couple of 100,000, we're talking less than 1%, 1.2% if you're saving a couple of 100,000. So I guess, yeah, if you can save it, you do save it. But here's the problem I potentially have, and I know this is a long shot. What if Boston Scott has a really good year? What if he outperforms all other Eagle running backs? And at the end of the year, the Eagles look at him as their number one running back. He'll be a free agent again because he only signed a 1-year contract. If I'm Boston Scott's agent, if I'm Boston Scott, more importantly, I'll remember that the Eagles squeezed me. Yeah, you got me to sign. Yeah, you saved a couple of $100,000, but that came out of my pocket. If I have a bigger year next year and I'm a free agent, the Eagles want to retain me because he is deemed to be that good a fit in Nick Sirianni's system. Oh, yeah, I'm going to hold the Eagles above and beyond. One of those money's equal in two different places. Oh, he's going to stay with the hometown team. Well, not if you do what the Eagles did to Boston Scott here. Maybe he says, well, I'm going to get those couple of $100,000 and then some back. If the Eagles want to retain me, yeah, it's going to cost them more than Team X, who's willing to pay me close to the same thing. I'll take close because the Eagles, I'm going to expect more out of. Sometimes you have to factor that in. Sometimes the savings doesn't equate to the bad will that you're going to have with the player. And that's why I said what I did about Boston Scott before he re-signed with the Eagles this week. We'll see how it shakes out. They did save a couple of $100,000. I'm sure with the Fletcher Cox thing, when we get Brad Spielberg on, he's going to explain to us where the Eagles saved $1 million, $2 million, somewhere thereabouts under the cap. That's a little bit more significant. So it's a bigger ballpark that you're playing in. Howie's really good at that. Always has been. Your stance of their very good evaluation is true. I think they managed the cap as well as almost every other team in the National Football League. We'll see if these little side deals that they do, you got to be able to turn around and make use of it. Every couple of $100,000 that you save, you got to put into somewhere else, have the ability to use that. Bringing back Anthony Harris, was that the big move of the weekend, John? If not, certainly the Fletcher Cox is the biggest name of it, but Anthony Harris retained on a 1-year deal. You pumping your fist after that one?
Well, I don't think anybody's pumping their fist, but real quick before we turn the page on Boston, he got 1.75. So, you hear the spin of the agent, and there's some incentives in there, but that's not going to count against the salary cap. I think that
unless he achieves them, then it counts against next year.
Yeah, but I mean, 9 times out of 10, those incentives are unachievable, and that's how these agents get these giant numbers out there that nobody ever sees. The total guarantee $1.1 million, so that's the real value of the contract. So it's a little bit more significant. But yeah, from a playing perspective,
well, hold on. Which one is it? The contract 1.75 or it's 1.1?
Well, he's guaranteed 1.1. His salary is 1.75. I assume.
Do you think Boston's not going to make the team?
No, I assume he's going to make the team. I assume he's going to make that 1.75.
Then the number is 1.75 if you're projecting.
Yeah, but Jody, this is one of those things where you got to be right. You don't got to be right all the time. In the case of Boston Scott, look, you could say Miles Sanders is a starting running back on this team. Kenny Gainwell right now is the second string running back on this team. That's the plan moving forward. They're probably going to draft a running back. Boston Scott is going to be the third or fourth running back on this team. Now, I can't tell you everybody's not going to get injured, and maybe everybody gets injured. Everybody falls aside. Everybody doesn't play well. Boston gets his chance and opportunity and plays lights out. I was going to be up anyway, even if they gave him the $2.43 million. So you can't run your team like that is all I'm trying to say. The Eagles made the right valuation. We kill Howie Roseman when he gets stuff wrong, and I'll kill him right now with the safety position. And you got to give him credit when he does stuff right. In this indication, he did stuff right. Now, with Anthony Harris, and there's two different sort of balls on this particular thing. It's sort of like wide receiver as well. The Eagles know they have to get better at the position. They tried to sign Marcus Williams. They were in on Marcus Williams. Baltimore went to a spot they didn't want to go. We talk about valuation. The New York Jets, I think, offered more money. I've heard conflicting reports. I was told both the Jets and the Ravens outbid the Eagles for Marcus Williams, but some other people heard some different things and said the Eagles were close to what Baltimore offered. I don't think that's the case, but here nor there. So there's two different things. Like this is a results driven business. So when you don't get results, like the Eagles haven't been able to upgrade a wide receiver, they haven't been able to upgrade at safety. They haven't gotten those results. But then the mindset is different, right? You know, they're trying. They tried to trade for Calvin Ridley. They thought they had to trade for Calvin Ridley. They were in on Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson just wanted to go to the Super Bowl champions. Some people said they were in on Robert Woods. Haven't been able to confirm that yet. He goes to the Tennessee Titans. There was another receiver. Christian Kirk. And we all know the money he got was just ridiculous. You can't pay him that. They're paying him like he's the 2022 Jerry Rice. That's absurd what Jacksonville gave him. And the same thing with Marcus Williams at safety. So, you know, at wide receiver, it's obviously more obvious because you don't get plan A, you don't get plan B, you don't get plan C. You're already down to plan E. And maybe we're talking about Zach Pascal at the end of the week, but who knows, or in a couple weeks, which isn't going to excite people. And the same thing with Anthony Harris, that isn't going to excite people. The most interesting thing to me is I thought they were going to sign one between Rodney McLeod and Anthony Harris, and I thought they would default to Rodney McLeod. But I also said I thought Gannon would rather have Anthony Harris of the two. Now, neither should be sexy to the fans because they're both declining.
Let me jump in there and ask you a question. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think Gannon would prefer Harris over Rodney McLeod? I'm assuming it has to do with their abilities on the field because Rodney's been here longer, but Gannon isn't tied to the previous Rodney McLeod achievements, aka Super Bowl champion and the like. What is it about Harris that you think Gannon prefers his game to McLeod's?
Well, one, he's been around Harris more than he's been around McLeod, so he's very comfortable. He's very familiar with the player. He was in Minnesota when Anthony started his career, so Anthony's got a better feel for what Jonathan wants to do, even though Rodney's been here much longer for the Eagles, but that was obviously Jim Schwartz. So I think Anthony was a better fit for Jonathan. That's why they went out and got him in the first place. I didn't think he played at a level where you would say, but the Eagles have made a big deal about this in front of the cameras and behind the cameras, about this. We're an extension of the coaching staff. And a lot of that is always lip service. I certainly think it was lip service during the Doug Peterson era, to be honest. But they do seem to be trying to be more cognizant of getting players that fit what their coaches want to do. Hassan Reddick, perfect example of that. That position didn't even exist under the old regime. And now they bring in a player, a big money player for them, certainly at a position that didn't even exist 2 years ago in Philadelphia. That's one example. Anthony Harris was one example. Eric Wilson was one example, not a good example, but he was an example of a player they thought could fit a particular scheme. They do seem to be trending in that direction a little bit more. And I think this was, hey, who do you want? One of the two, to Jonathan Gannon. He said, well, I'd rather have Anthony. And that's some of they're going to get a safety. Might be in the draft, might be still in free agency. They're going to get another safety. But it certainly seems like, and certainly Rodney thinks they made their decision. And you never say never, but it doesn't look like Rodney's going to be back.
Eagles at safety. Here's Epsy. Just saying.
Well, they like Mark. Yeah, I mean, Marcus played very well last year, to be honest, in limited times. Now, there's a lot of players that can play well for limited, like a good backup infield or utility man in baseball. There's a lot of guys who are good when they got to play a day a week and they can play a bunch of different positions, and they become very valuable. And then the more they play, if somebody gets hurt, they tend to get exposed. That's what you have to see with Marcus Epps. Can, if he's forced into playing, can he keep up that level of play over an extensive amount of snaps, or opposing offense is going to figure out, hey, 22's on the field. Let's take advantage of that. It's interesting, but the Eagles are going to get a safety. They're in draft, or they don't even like Kayvon Wallace a little bit at this point. I mean, they're going to get a safety if it's in the draft, even for depth purposes, still on free agency. Everybody wants
somebody's got to start. Depth is nice. Don't you have to get your starters in place and then worry about your depth rather than get your depth and go, yeah, we still had a starter position.
Well, if you find a way,
do we have depth at safety?
If you find a way to get Kyle Hamilton because he ran a 4.6 and he falls, then your issues are solved.
Right.
Then you have, the kid Baylor. I know people are talking Petrie from Baylor, I think his name is Jalen Petrie. If they get him in the second round, then you sort of have like a talented kid. Maybe he can hit the ground running, maybe he can't, but they're going to get a safety somewhere, and they might sign a veteran still. Everybody wants the honey badger. I don't. Everything depends on market. The fact that he's still out there tells you a lot. Just talking to some people who say, he doesn't have the same speed he did have a couple of years ago. So I think it's buyer beware on him.
When you say they're going to get a safety, I'll take it your word, but we probably could have said the same thing last year with they're going to get a linebacker. And then they got Eric Wilson. So just acknowledging.
Oh, yeah, they might get the wrong safety. I'm not saying they're going to get the right.
That's the point
safety
I'm trying to make here. Just saying they're going to get a safety doesn't do the laundry for me. Get a safety that can step in and start and be an average player. I'm not even asking for above average. I'm not asking for great like the Honey Badger. I want a competent safety. We don't know that they're going to be able to get that just yet. All right, he's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are the Mac and Mac guys. We told you Brad Spielberg from Pro Football Focus and overthecap.com is going to come on and try and help us understand and break down the details of how the Eagles saved money, what Howie Roseman was able to accomplish to give himself more wiggle room under the cap with the release and then re-signing of Fletcher Cox. So we'll get Brad up here in hour number 2. But